Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, in this video, we're going to start our exploration, our discussion on the topic of the names and characteristics of the Quran. So as we all know, the Quran is the speech of Allah. When أحد من المشركين استجارك فأجره حتى يسمع كلام الله. Allah refers to the Quran as being His speech. And obviously, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has many different names and many different characteristics. And likewise, His speech, the Quran, Allah has named it different things. Allah sometimes refers to the Quran as being kitab, a book. Sometimes Allah refers to the Quran as being muhaymin, an overseer and a witness to previous other scriptures. Allah mentions likewise attributes of the Quran. وَإِنَّهُ لَكِتَابٌ عَزِيزٌ. Allah says the Quran is a book that is aziz, that is mighty. Allah says the Quran is kareem, honorable. And many other verses of the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to the Quran with different names and different characteristics to show its greatness. Allah likewise mentions certain special things about the Quran. So for example, Allah says, وَلَأَنَّ قُرْآنًا سُيِّرَتْ بِهِ الْجِبَالُ وَقُطَّعَتْ بِهِ الْأَرْضُ أَوْ كُلِّمَ بِهِ الْمَوْتَى. Allah says, if there was a recitation that would be able to make the mountains move or make the earth split asunder or would bring the dead back to life, it will be this Quran. لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله. Allah says, if we were to send down this Quran on a mountain, you would see it crumble out of humility and fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Quran is a book that is mighty, that is great. And likewise, we should make sure to spend some time understanding different names and different characteristics that Allah has given the Quran. Because as Ibn Qayyim mentions, ليس شيء أنفع لعبده في معاشه ومعاده وأقرب إلى نجاته ما تدبر القرآن. There's nothing that is more beneficial for a slave in this life and in the hereafter, and that's closer to bringing him to his success or her success than pondering on the Quran. فتدبر القرآن رمت الحدى فالعلم تحت تدبر القرآن كل كتاب الذي مقام يقرأه كأنما خاطب الرحمن بالكلم. As Ibn Qayyim likewise says, that if you want to have knowledge, then verily, and if you want to be guided, then verily you should ponder on the Quran. Because it's the book that when the person reads it, it's as if he was speaking to Ar-Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in this short series that's starting on Ramadan pretty much, we're going to be exploring the different names and the different characteristics that Allah has given the Quran. So the scholars have mentioned various names of the Quran. The following is a list of the 55 different names of the Quran mentioned by Imam Az-Zakarashi. The scholars have mentioned various names of the Quran. The following is a list of the 55 different names of the Quran mentioned by Imam Az-Zakarashi and Imam As-Suyuti. So the scholars of Islam have looked at the Quran and have tried to enumerate all the different names that Allah gives the Quran. Because as we mentioned, sometimes Allah refers to the Quran with various different names and likewise various different attributes. So Imam Az-Zakarashi, who wrote Al-Burhan, a very famous book of Usul al-Tafsir, and likewise Imam As-Suyuti wrote Al-Itqan, which is also a very famous book of Usul al-Tafsir. They actually tried to bring about and to list all the different names of the Quran. So both Imam Az-Zakarashi and Imam As-Suyuti, both of their books are considered the most comprehensive and the best books ever written on the topic of Usul al-Tafsir, or I should say Ulum al-Tafsir, the sciences of the Quran. So these two books, Al-Burhan, the Zakarashi, and Al-Itqan, the Suyuti, both of them explore the various sciences that revolve around the Quran, whether that has to do with the Arabic language, or the Qira'at, or Tafsir, or An-Nasakh al-Mansukh, or Asbab al-Nuzul, or even the different names of the Quran. Now, why is this important? Why is it important for us to look at different names that Allah has given the Quran? Imam al-Faruz al-Abadi, who was a very famous scholar of the Arabic language, who wrote Al-Qamus, which is a very famous Arabic dictionary, he said, know that something having many names indicates the honor of that thing or its perfection in a matter. Then the Imam mentions examples until he says, likewise, the many names of the Quran indicate its honor and merit. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and likewise, people in general, when they give a lot, when they hold something in high esteem, and when they want to give a lot of importance to something, they will give that thing many names. They will give that thing many names. And this is something that's a sociological reality, or social linguistic reality, I should say. So even in regular language, like in the Arabic language, the Arabs, they have many different words for the camel. They have many different words for the sword, because these things are things that were very important to the Arabs. And likewise, in English, we have some things that have more than one name to show importance to those things. Okay? So likewise, when it comes to the deen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, many times He'll give many names to things that are important. So we know that the Yawm al-Qiyam, the Day of Judgment, has many different names. Yawm al-Hasara, Yawm al-Azifa, Yawm al-Taghabun, Yawm al-Hashr, many different names. Yawm al-Tanad, the Day of Calling, the Day of Gathering, the Day of Resurrection, the Day of Standing, the Day of Judgment, the Day of Regret, the Day that is near. There are many different names for the Day of Judgment. Likewise, you know, the Prophet Muhammad has more than one name, Muhammad, Ahmed, and so on and so forth. And that's why Sheikh Mahmoud bin Ahmed, who wrote Azamatul Quran, a very nice book called The Magnificence of the Quran, as his master's thesis, if I'm not mistaken, he mentions human beings can do their best to describe the magnificence of the Quran in their words. But as much as they try to be eloquent and pithy in their description, Allah's description of the Quran is better and more fitting. This is only natural since none is more acquainted with his speech than he is. Allah described the Quran in two important ways. He gave it different names. It is a well-known feature of the Arabic language that the more a name a thing has, the more significance is attached to it. For example, the Day of Judgment and the Prophet ﷺ. And likewise, the second thing that Allah has described the Quran is, which is also important, is Allah gave a description of the various qualities, features, and attributes of the Quran. So the names that the scholars, Imam al-Zakarishi and likewise Imam al-Suyuti, they brought together, the 55 names are here. We have Al-Kitab, Al-Quran, Al-Nur, Al-Kalam, Al-Huda, Al-Rahman. We have the proof for the verse reference here. Al-Rahman, Al-Furqan, or Al-Rahma, sorry, Al-Furqan, Al-Shifa, Al-Maw'idha, Al-Ali. And so it keeps on going until we reach a total of 55 names. So in this short series, inshallah, every now and then I will be releasing a video where we'll be covering some of these names. So inshallah, these videos will be fairly short. The first thing we're going to start off with is Al-Furqan. This video is just an introduction to this concept, which is not often talked about, which is the concept or the discussion of the different names and attributes that the Quran has, and how by understanding these different names and attributes, we will draw closer and we'll have a greater understanding of the Quran, just like studying the names and attributes of Allah does, or give us a better understanding of Allah. Likewise, studying the names of the Day of Judgment gives us a better understanding of the Day of Judgment. And likewise, if we study different names and attributes of the Quran, we'll have a greater appreciation, a greater attachment, and a greater understanding of the Quran, the speech of Allah. So this, inshallah, is what we're going to be doing in the month of Ramadan. So I'll be releasing these videos every now and then, covering one or two names in every single video. Barakallahu feek, jazakumullah khair for listening. Subhanaka wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.